My name is Emily Langford. I am 25 years old, and last month my parents told me I was no longer part of this family. Not because I betrayed them, not because I failed them, but because I refused to hand over the very thing my grandmother trusted me to protect. The Langford farm had been in our family for 3 generations, 20 acres of Kansas soil that held our name, our memories, and now, apparently, my worth. When my mother called her, voice was soft in a way that meant danger. Emily family means sacrifice. If you can't give your brother what's rightfully his, then maybe you don't belong here anymore. Rightfully his. That phrase burned through my chest like acid. I had spent half my life repairing broken fences, planting crops through storm seasons, and saving that land from foreclosure when Adam disappeared for months. Still in their eyes, I was only the caretaker until the real heir was ready. My father's message came later that night, short, final, military, precise. Either you sign the transfer papers or consider yourself out of this family. No greeting, no love, just an order. For a while, I sat at my kitchen table staring at the phone screen until the battery died, thinking about every Sunday dinner where my mother asked me to serve my brother first every time my father said he carries the name Emily. You just borrow it. I didn't cry. I didn't even get angry. I just went quiet, the kind of quiet Grandma Lucille used to call dangerous. Because silence in the Langford bloodline never meant surrender. It meant calculation. What my parents didn't know was that Adam's own lawyer had already contacted me the day before. His tone was cautious, respectful, almost apologetic. "Ms. Langford," he said, "I think we need to meet privately. There's something you should see." I remember gripping the edge of the counter as he spoke, the sound of the rain outside hitting the tin roof steady and relentless like the truth I had been avoiding. My parents thought they could shame me into submission, but they had no idea that their perfect son had already made a mistake big enough to bury them all. And I was finally ready to dig. Langford Farm sat at the edge of Langford County like a stubborn monument, 20 acres of corn and dust and pride. My father, Richard Langford, 61, believed the land was proof that a man's worth could be measured in acres. He still wore his old army jacket when he walked the fields, as if every row of corn needed to salute him. He said the soil answered to him, but in truth, it answered to my grandmother Lucille, who had built this farm after the war with her own hands. My mother, Patricia, 58, was the kind of woman who prayed before every meal and used faith as a curtain to hide favoritism. "A daughter's duty is to support her family," she'd whisper whenever I questioned why Adam, my brother, got everything. Adam Langford was 29, and my father's mirror image, except the reflection, was cracked. He'd dropped out of college, borrowed money he never paid back, and carried himself like every mistake he made was someone else's fault. When he failed, my parents called it bad luck. When I succeeded, they called it pride. Growing up, I thought if I worked hard enough, I could earn my father's respect. I studied agricultural engineering, came home after graduation, and applied everything I'd learned. I introduced new irrigation systems, crop rotation schedules, and soil testing that increased yield by 30%. My father said nothing. Adam posted about his farm's success on Facebook, and suddenly I became invisible again. The only person who ever truly saw me was Grandma Lucille. She'd sit on the porch swing, her hands rough from years of work, her eyes kind but sharp. "You've got my hands, Emily," she told me once. "They build, they fix, they endure. That scares men who only know how to order others around." When she passed, I felt the wind change. Not just grief, it was a shift in balance. Without her, my father became the law, my mother the enforcer, and Adam the heir. They stopped asking me to help with accounts or planting schedules. They stopped speaking to me like I was family. One night over dinner, my father announced, "When the time comes, this farm will return to its rightful owner." He looked at Adam. My mother smiled. I pretended not to notice, but Grandma's words echoed in my head. Some seeds grow best in silence. When Grandma Lucille died, the house felt like it forgot how to breathe. The porch swing where she used to sit barely moved in the wind, and even the wind itself seemed hesitant, as if mourning her too. She had passed quietly in her sleep, the way strong people often do, without warning, without drama, just absence. My parents didn't cry at the funeral. My father busied himself greeting church members and boasting about how the Langford legacy would live on. My mother stood beside him, dabbing at dry eyes, making sure everyone noticed her grief. Adam arrived late, wearing a suit that didn't fit and sunglasses too dark for a cloudy day. He hugged my father and whispered, "I'll take care of it, Dad." I wasn't sure what it was, but I knew it wasn't me. After the service, when everyone left, I stayed behind. The sky had turned the color of ashes. I stood by Grandma's grave and whispered, "You saw this coming, didn't you?" The wind shifted then, as if answering yes. A week later, I received a call from Attorney Miller, Grandma's longtime lawyer. "Emily, we'll be reading Lucille's will next Friday. Your parents and brother have been notified." His voice carried a hint of caution, like he already knew what kind of storm was waiting. On the day of the reading, we gathered in his small office above the hardware store. The air smelled of old paper and tension. My father sat with arms crossed, jaw tight. My mother clutched her Bible like a weapon. Adam lounged back smug, certain of victory. I sat alone, my palms sweating. Attorney Miller cleared his throat and began. "Mrs. Lucille Langford leaves her savings account personal items and all household contents to her granddaughter, Emily Langford." My mother gasped softly, her knuckles whitening. "Furthermore," he continued, "she leaves full ownership of the Langford farm, including the land, machinery, and residence to Emily Langford." Silence. Heavy, stunned silence. Then came my father's voice, low and dangerous. "This will be corrected," my mother whispered. She must have been confused. She wasn't well. Adam leaned forward, face red. She was manipulated. Emily filled her head with nonsense about soil and sustainability. Grandma didn't know what she was doing. I didn't argue. I just looked at the framed photo on the lawyer's desk of his own family, the kind of photo mine could never take again. Attorney Miller slid the papers across the table toward me. "It's all legal." Mrs. Langford was of sound mind. "The will is binding." My father's fist hit the table. "We'll see about that." My mother began to cry loudly for show. Adam stormed out, slamming the door so hard the glass shook. I sat there, the deed in my trembling hands, realizing that Grandma hadn't left me a gift. She had left me a battle. And as I walked out into the cold afternoon air, I knew the fight had only begun. The days that followed felt like living under siege. The phone never stopped ringing, and every call carried another weaponized word: family duty, love, loyalty. My mother was the first to strike. "Emily," she said sweetly, "your grandmother meant well, but she didn't understand how things work now. You're too young to manage a farm of that size. Adam can take care of it until you're ready." I told her I'd been managing it for 3 years already, that the harvest record spoke for itself. She sighed, disappointed, like I'd failed a test. "You always think everything has to be fair." "Life isn't fair, Emily. Sometimes God chooses one child to carry the burden. In our family, burden meant privilege if you were male." The next day, Dad showed up at the farm unannounced. I heard his truck before I saw him. He walked in without knocking, smelling of diesel and anger. "You're gonna give Adam the land," he said flatly. "This isn't up for debate." I stayed calm, though my heart was pounding. "It's not yours to give away, Dad." His eyes went hard. "Everything with Langford on it belongs to me. Then why did Grandma's will say otherwise?" I asked quietly. He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the tobacco on his breath. "You're just like her," he said, voice trembling with rage. "Stubborn, prideful. No man's ever gonna want a woman who challenges him like that." I wanted to tell him I didn't need to be wanted. I needed to be respected. But I knew it wouldn't matter. He wasn't listening. He never had. By the weekend, they'd enlisted the entire family. Aunt May called from Topeka. "Sweetheart, your daddy's heart can't take this kind of stress. Just sign the papers for peace." Cousin Laura texted, "It's just land. Don't tear your family apart." Even the pastor's wife stopped by with pie and advice about humility. Every word pressed heavier on my chest. Adam, of course, played the martyr. He sent long messages about wanting to build a modern agribusiness, something Grandma would be proud of. When I didn't reply, he showed up drunk at midnight, pounding on my door. "You think you're better than me," he shouted. "You're nothing without this dirt." He was right about one thing: the dirt was power. That's why they all wanted it. I stood at the window watching him stumble back to his truck, the moonlight catching his face twisted in bitterness. By Monday, the texts changed from persuasion to threats. Dad's final message arrived that night. Either you transfer the land or don't come home again. We'll tell people you turned your back on the family. Your choice. I stared at the words until they blurred. Then I burned the letter in Grandma's old stove, watching the paper curl into ash. When the fire died, I whispered into the silence, "You taught me how to plant, Grandma. Now I'll learn how to defend." For the first time in my life, I wasn't their daughter. I was their opponent. The email came at dawn, its subject line colder than the morning air property transfer agreement. It was from Adam's lawyer, Noah Briggs. Attached was a contract written in tight legal language that bled arrogance. The document demanded I sign over Langford Farm to Adam within 10 business days. The last page carried a clause that made my stomach twist. Failure to comply will be considered family abandonment and result in forfeiture of shared assets. Shared assets. What a beautiful lie. The Langfords never shared anything. I read the lines again and again, each word a knife sharpened by guilt. At the bottom, Noah's signature sat beside Adam's confident and sure. I almost deleted the email, but curiosity stopped me. What kind of lawyer helps a man steal from his own sister? My mother called an hour later. "Did you see the document, sweetheart?" she asked, her voice honey smooth. "It's a fair arrangement. You'll still be part of the family once this is settled." "You mean once I give up everything I said?" "You're overreacting," she replied. "Think of your brother. He's trying to rebuild his life with my inheritance." There was silence, the kind that hums with unspoken fury. "Emily," she finally said, "you're breaking your father's heart." I wanted to tell her he'd broken mine long before this, but I didn't. I hung up instead. That night, I drove past the old house. The windows glowed with warm light, but inside, I saw 3 silhouettes: my father at the table, Adam leaning back smugly, my mother pouring coffee. I'd never felt more like a stranger in my own family. When I got home, I poured myself a glass of water and stared at the contract on my screen. The cursor blinked like a pulse waiting. My grandmother's words floated through my mind. Never let them confuse love with control. I closed the laptop and whispered to the empty room. Not this time. The next morning, a new message appeared. It was from Noah Briggs. "Ms. C. Langford, I understand this situation is tense. For what it's worth, I don't agree with how this is being handled. If you'd like to discuss the matter privately, I'm available." For a moment, I thought it was a trick, but something in his tone, measured, cautious, felt different. I replied with one word. When his answer came fast. "Tomorrow, 2 p.m. at Miller's Cafe." I sat back, the faintest flicker of hope igniting behind my exhaustion. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end of my story. Maybe it was the start of theirs unraveling. I almost didn't show up. A part of me thought it was a trap, that Noah Briggs was just another polished face on my brother's payroll. But curiosity has a way of sounding like courage when you're desperate. Miller's Cafe was nearly empty that afternoon, just the hum of a ceiling fan and the faint smell of burnt coffee. Noah was already there, sitting by the window, sleeves rolled up, a briefcase at his side. He stood when he saw me. "Ms. Langford," he said, "thank you for coming." His tone wasn't rehearsed. It was human. I sat across from him, wary but composed. "So, what's this really about?" I asked. He opened the briefcase and slid a document toward me. "Your brother used the Langford farm as collateral for a private loan 6 months ago." I blinked. "That's impossible. The deed is in my name." "Legally, yes," he said. "But the loan application lists him as co-beneficiary of family trust. It's false, but the lender didn't verify ownership. If he defaults, they'll come after the property." My stomach turned. He tried to use my land to pay his debts. Noah nodded. "And he's already missed 2 payments. I couldn't stay quiet about it. Your grandmother was my client once, too. She taught me to respect honesty more than bloodlines." I didn't know whether to thank him or cry. I stared out the window, watching dust dance in the sunlight. "They called me selfish," I whispered. "Said I was tearing the family apart." "People like that," Noah said softly, "don't want peace. They want obedience." He leaned forward. "Listen, Emily, you have every legal right to defend this inheritance, but you'll need to act fast before they file for a transfer. I can help you. Off the record." I hesitated. Why? He smiled faintly. Because I've seen this before. Families destroy the one person who refuses to play by their rules. His words hit like truth wrapped in warning. I took the document, my hands shaking. For the first time since Grandma's funeral, I felt something solid beneath my fear, a plan forming roots taking hold. As I stood to leave, Noah said quietly, "Lucille used to say, 'You had her fire. Don't let them put it out.'" I froze. "You knew her." "She helped me once years ago," he said. "She told me justice grows best in patient soil." Outside, the wind carried the scent of the fields dry and alive. I looked back at the cafe door and realized the war I'd been avoiding had already started and I wasn't the one cornered anymore. That night I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with the documents Noah had given me spread out like puzzle pieces that spelled betrayal. The numbers, signatures, and dates told a story clearer than words ever could. Adam had been drowning in debt, and my parents had thrown him a rope woven from my future. At dawn, I drove to the courthouse and requested copies of Grandma Lucille's property records. The clerk, a tired woman with reading glasses perched at the end of her nose, flipped through the files and handed me a yellowed folder. "Funny thing," she said. "Your grandmother updated her deed in 1989, removed joint ownership with your father. Smart lady." I opened the folder right there at the counter. Inside was her handwriting, neat, firm, purposeful. A note attached to the transfer read, "This land must remain with the one who cultivates it, not the one who claims it." I felt tears sting my eyes. Grandma had known. Decades before this mess began, she had seen it coming. Her trust in me hadn't been sentimental. It was strategic. She had protected me from my own bloodline. I met Noah again that evening. He ordered black coffee, I ordered courage. When I showed him the documents, his eyes widened. "She separated the farm from the family estate," he said. "That means even if your parents contest the will, they can't touch this property, not without your consent." "So they can't take it," I said, hardly believing it. "Not legally," he replied, "but they'll try anyway. Your father will push emotional pressure until you break." "He's been doing that my whole life," I said quietly. "I'm still here." Noah smiled faintly. "Then it's time you start fighting back with paperwork instead of pain." Over the next week, we filed ownership confirmation with the county clerk, notified the lender about Adam's fraudulent collateral, and secured a legal injunction preventing any transfer. It was tedious, exhausting work, but each stamped page felt like armor. Every night I reread Grandma's note, her voice echoing through the ink. Patience grows stronger than greed. When I told my parents I'd filed for legal protection, my father's response was immediate and volcanic. He showed up at the farm again, veins bulging at his neck. "You think you can win this?" he barked. "You're nothing without this family." I stood my ground. This family made sure I'd have to become something without it. My mother stood behind him, eyes red, her voice trembling. "Emily, please, we can fix this quietly." "You mean secretly," I said. "Like always." She flinched. My father pointed at me, finger shaking. "You're dead to me if you go through with this." "Then I guess Grandma resurrected me," I said. He left in silence, gravel spitting beneath his tires. That night, Noah called. "You did the right thing," he said, "but prepare yourself. People who rely on control don't surrender it. They escalate." I looked out over the fields, the moonlight silvering the rows of corn Grandma once planted. "Then, let them escalate," I whispered. "I've been patient long enough." The meeting was my father's idea. "We'll settle this as a family," he said on the phone, which meant they'd already decided how it would end. I agreed to meet them at the old farmhouse on Saturday morning, but not alone. Noah insisted on coming with me. "They won't expect you to have legal backup," he said, adjusting his tie in the mirror of his truck before we went in. "Let's keep them surprised." When we arrived, the air inside the house was thick with the smell of coffee and confrontation. My father sat at the head of the dining table posture, rigid eyes cold. My mother hovered beside him, rosary beads twisted in her fingers. Adam was there too, pretending confidence, wearing the same arrogance he'd borrowed from Dad his whole life. "You brought a lawyer?" my father said, voice dripping contempt. "I brought a witness," I replied. He grunted. "You always did need someone else to fight your battles." Noah placed a folder on the table. "Mr. Langford." Before we begin, you should know your son used the Langford property, Ms. Langford's property, as collateral for a personal loan. That's illegal." Adam's smirk faltered. "You can't prove that." Noah slid the document across the table. "Already did. Here's the loan application, the default notices, and the forged trust claim. I've filed an injunction to protect Ms. Langford's ownership." My father's jaw tightened, but he didn't look at Adam, he looked at me. "You went to the courts. I went to the truth," I said evenly. My mother's voice cracked. "Emily, please, you're tearing this family apart." "No," I said softly. "You tore it apart when you decided Adam's mistakes were worth more than my work." Adam slammed his fist on the table. "You think you're better than me?" "No," I said. "I just stopped letting you take credit for my life." My father stood face red, fists clenched. "You listen to me, girl. Everything you have, every inch of that soil came from me." "From Grandma," I corrected. "And you tried to erase her from her own legacy." The silence after that felt like thunder trapped in a bottle. Noah spoke first, his tone calm but cutting. "Mr. Langford, I'd advise you to lower your voice. Any further threats could be used against you in court." "Court," my mother whispered, horrified. "You'd drag us into court, Emily." "You dragged me there first," I said. "I'm just showing up." My father leaned forward until his face was inches from mine. "If you go through with this, you're no daughter of mine." I didn't flinch. "You stopped being a father the day you made me prove I deserved to be one." The room went quiet again. Even Adam looked shaken, though pride still flickered behind his eyes like a dying flame. My mother began to cry, tears running down her cheeks in practiced lines. "We just want peace," she said. "Then stop calling control peace," I replied. Noah gathered the papers. "This conversation is over. My client has every legal right to retain her inheritance. Any attempt to coerce her further will result in criminal charges." My father laughed bitterly. "You think a few papers will protect you? You think a lawyer can save you from blood?" I looked him dead in the eye. "No, but he can make sure my blood doesn't keep paying for yours." When Noah and I walked out, the morning sun was blinding, washing the anger from my skin. Behind us, my father shouted something I didn't catch. I didn't need to. The sound of him losing control was enough. At the truck, Noah turned to me. That was brave. "No," I said, staring back at the house that once felt like home. That was necessary. The door slammed behind me, the final punctuation mark on a sentence 3 generations long. The courthouse in Langford County was small, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone's story before the judge even walked in. Word had spread fast. The Langfords were taking each other to court. The benches were packed, neighbors, old friends, even members of my mother's church came to witness the family's unraveling. My father sat at the plaintiff's table beside Adam, both in dark suits that looked more like armor than clothing. My mother clutched her Bible in the front row, eyes closed, as if prayer could rewrite evidence. I sat with Noah calm on the outside chaos underneath. When the judge entered, everyone rose. He was an older man with sharp eyes, the kind that could cut through pity. "We're here regarding the contested inheritance of the late Mrs. Lucille Langford," he began. "Plaintiffs allege undue influence by the defendant, Ms. Emily Langford." My father's lawyer stood smooth and self-assured. "Your Honor, my clients believe that Mrs. Lucille Langford, in her declining health, was manipulated by her granddaughter into altering her will." I could almost hear the whispers ripple through the crowd. Manipulated. That was the story they'd chosen, make me the villain, the ungrateful granddaughter who stole what wasn't hers. Noah rose. "Your Honor, the defense will show that the will was valid, intentional, and a reflection of Mrs. Langford's wishes. We will also show that Mr. Adam Langford committed fraudulent acts in an attempt to claim ownership of property that does not belong to him." My father glared jaw tight. The first witness was a neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, who'd known our family for decades. "Lucille loved both her grandchildren," she said, voice trembling. "But she told me often that Emily was the one who understood her values. She said, 'Adam sees money in the land. Emily sees life.'" The courtroom murmured. My father's lawyer tried to discredit her, Mrs. Thompson, isn't it true that Lucille was often forgetful in her later years? The old woman's eyes flashed. She forgot birthdays, not morals. Then came the evidence. Noah projected copies of the 1989 deed transfer the bank records and the forged loan documents Adam had signed. The judge leaned forward, brow furrowed. "Mr. Langford," he said to Adam, "did you in fact use this property as collateral for a personal loan?" Adam swallowed. It was a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding involving a forged signature Noah pressed. The silence that followed was a confession all its own. My father shifted in his seat, whispering something harsh under his breath. My mother dabbed at her eyes. Noah called me to the stand. My hands trembled slightly as I placed them on the Bible. Ms. Langford, Noah began his tone measured. "Can you describe your relationship with your grandmother?" "She was the only person who saw me," I said quietly. "She taught me that integrity doesn't need approval. She also told me to protect this land not for profit, but for purpose." He nodded. "Did you influence her to change her will?" "No," I said. "She changed it because she saw what the rest of my family refused to. That I was the one working this farm, not talking about it." My father's lawyer smirked. "So you admit you benefited from her favoritism." I met his gaze. "I didn't benefit. I inherited responsibility." The rest of them inherited resentment. The courtroom erupted in whispers again. The judge called for silence, his gavel striking like thunder. When all testimonies had been heard, Noah stood for closing arguments. "This case isn't about greed," he said. "It's about justice." Mrs. Lucille Langford made a decision while of sound mind to entrust her life's work to the person who respected it most. The plaintiffs have not only failed to prove manipulation, they've demonstrated a pattern of coercion against the defendant. He gestured toward me. Ms. Langford didn't fight for wealth. She fought to honor the woman who raised her, and that your honor is something this court should respect. The judge's verdict came after a long silence that felt eternal. The court finds no evidence of undue influence. The will stands as written. Additionally, this court recognizes evidence of fraudulent use of property by Mr. Adam Langford. All claims against Ms. Langford are dismissed. My father exhaled sharply like a man punched in the chest. My mother covered her face. Adam muttered a curse. The gavel fell again, final and heavy. I didn't cheer. I didn't smile. I just felt the weight shift, the kind of silence Grandma used to call justice. As the room emptied, my father stopped in the aisle beside me. His voice was low bitter. "You think you won?" I looked up at him. "No," I said. "I think Grandma did." The verdict should have felt like victory, but it didn't. It felt like aftermath. The next morning, Langford County woke to gossip rippling through every diner, every church pew, every hardware store aisle. The Langfords lost to their own blood. My phone buzzed constantly. Screenshots of my mother's Facebook post filled my notifications. Some daughters destroy families for money. The comments were a mix of pity and venom. Poor Patricia. Ungrateful generation. Lucille must be rolling in her grave. I didn't respond. I'd spent too many years defending myself to people who already chose sides. Dad didn't come home for 3 days after the ruling. When he did, he drove past the farm without looking, as if the land itself had betrayed him. "Mom called that night." Her voice trembled between accusation and despair. "You humiliated your father. The whole town knows." "They know the truth," I said. "That's what scares you." "You'll regret this," she hissed. "Blood is thicker than law." "Maybe," I said, "but law doesn't lie." Then she hung up. The silence that followed was the kind that doesn't end. It just settles in your chest and stays. 2 weeks later, word spread that Adam had been fired from his job at the bank. Fraud leaves stains that no one wants on their payroll. The family name that once carried pride now carried whispers. I thought that might humble him, but he showed up at my door instead, drunk and desperate. "You ruined everything," he shouted. "Dad's sick from the stress. Mom cries every day. You took everything from us. I didn't invite him in. I took back what Grandma left me. That's all. She would have wanted me to have it. She wrote it down, Adam. She wanted me." He stared at me for a long, trembling moment. his face contorted by something I couldn't tell was grief or rage. "You'll be alone forever," he said finally. "No one stands by people like you." When I closed the door, I leaned against it, shaking not from fear, but from the weight of what he didn't understand. I hadn't just lost a brother. I'd lost the illusion that love in our family meant safety. The next morning, Noah stopped by. He looked tired but relieved. "It's over," he said. "The court's judgment is final." "For them?" Maybe I replied. "But I have to live with the fallout." He nodded. "You did the right thing. Sometimes right doesn't feel peaceful, it just feels honest." He left a copy of the finalized decree on the table. The seal of the court shimmered in the sunlight, official and irreversible. I traced my grandmother's name with my fingertips and whispered, "You saw this ending, didn't you?" Outside the fields swayed in the wind, golden and alive. The same land that had divided us was now the only thing holding me steady. Justice had come, but so had the cost. A month passed before I found the letter. It was buried in a cedar box Grandma had left in the attic, wrapped in an old handkerchief that still smelled faintly of lavender and soil. The handwriting was unmistakable, sharp, confident, utterly her. I unfolded it slowly, heart pounding. "My dearest Emily, if you're reading this, then I've already gone. By now, they've probably made you feel guilty for standing up for yourself. Don't. Remember, when people can't control you, they try to shame you. You were never born to carry their mistakes. You were born to correct them. If they ever make you choose between love and dignity, choose dignity. Love will find its way back when it's worth it." The words blurred through my tears. For the first time in months, I didn't feel angry. I just felt seen. Grandma had known every battle I would face and still believed I could win them without losing my soul. Later that week, I met Noah at the courthouse to sign the last set of documents finalizing ownership, securing taxes, all the dull details of victory. When we finished, he said Lucille was right about you. I smiled faintly. "You talk like you knew her better than I did." He hesitated, then said, "In a way I did. She helped me once, paid my first semester of law school after my father's accident. She said someday I'd repay her not with money, but with justice." My throat tightened. "She set all of this up," I whispered. "Even you." "She didn't set it up," he said softly. "She prepared it." That word prepared felt sacred. Grandma hadn't been controlling fate. She'd been protecting it. The following month, I used a portion of my savings to start the Langford Women's Cooperative Farm, a small program teaching local women sustainable agriculture and financial literacy. The first class had 5 women a widow, 2 single mothers, and 2 high school girls who wanted to learn about soil, not just social media. The same community that once whispered now applauded. Local newspapers called it the Langford Legacy Reborn. On opening day, the mayor gave a short speech about resilience and family values. I stood under the oak tree where Grandma used to drink her morning coffee, holding a framed photo of her in one hand and the deed in the other. When the applause faded, I looked across the field and saw my parents standing far away near the fence line. My mother wore sunglasses even though it was cloudy. My father leaned on his cane thinner now, older somehow. They didn't approach, but when I caught his eyes, he nodded once barely, but enough. For a moment, I saw something like regret flicker in his expression. Then they turned and left. That night, as the sun melted into gold over the fields, I walked through the rows of young crops, running my hand along the leaves. I felt peace, not the kind that comes from winning, but the kind that comes from surviving. Grandma had once told me, a garden doesn't forgive neglect, but it always rewards care. Standing there, I finally understood what she meant. This land wasn't just soil, it was redemption. A year later, Langford Farm no longer looked like the place that broke me. It looked like the place that rebuilt me. The barns gleamed with fresh paint, the fields thrived under new irrigation systems, and the cooperative had grown from 5 women to 23. Every Saturday morning, laughter filled the air as women of all ages learned to plant harvest and manage money in their own names. Sometimes I'd stand on the porch and watch them, a coffee mug in hand, remembering how quiet this land once was. That silence had been grief. Now it was balance. Adam hadn't spoken to me since the verdict. I heard through town gossip that he'd left Kansas chasing another business venture that folded within months. My parents sold their house and moved to Arizona for a fresh start. But even from across state lines, the past had a way of circling back. One afternoon, Noah showed up at the farm with that familiar half smile that always meant bad news, softened by good intentions. "You should sit down," he said. "Your father called me this morning." I raised an eyebrow. "He called you. Apparently your brother defaulted on another loan. The creditor traced the documents and found irregularities. Your father wanted to know if you'd help." I laughed, not bitterly but tiredly. "He still thinks I'm his cleanup crew." Noah nodded. "He's a proud man with a broken compass. And Mom." "She asked if you'd pray for him." I looked out over the fields where a dozen young crops shimmered like emerald ribbons. "I already have," I said quietly. That evening, as the sun dipped low, I found a letter waiting in my mailbox. No return address, but I knew the handwriting. My mother's, Emily. "We've made mistakes. Maybe we loved wrong, but we loved all the same. Your father doesn't have much time. He still won't say it, but he's proud. I hope one day you'll forgive us." I folded the letter and slipped it into the same box where Grandma's had rested a place for lessons written in pain. Weeks passed, and life carried on. The cooperative expanded, investors reached out, and the farm was thriving. Yet some nights when the crickets hummed and the house grew still, I'd feel Grandma's presence, as if she were walking beside me through the fields. One evening, Noah visited again holding a folder. "There's something you should see," he said. Inside was a document stamped with an official seal. "I bought Adam's last debt from the bank," he explained. "It's forgiven now, wiped clean." I stared at him speechless. "Why would you do that?" He smiled gently. "Because justice isn't revenge, Emily. It's restoration. Your grandmother taught me that." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The wind rustled through the cornfields, the sound soft and steady like an old lullaby. "She'd be proud of you," I said finally. "No," he replied. "She'd be proud of you." The next morning, I woke before dawn and stepped out into the cool air. The horizon glowed pink, the first light touching every row of corn, every fence post, every stone. Grandma once laid by hand. I walked barefoot through the soil, feeling its warmth, its memory. This was her gift, this land, this peace, this freedom carved from chaos. Some people inherit money. I had inherited resilience. As I reached the end of the field, I turned back toward the farmhouse, the house that had once been a battleground and was now a sanctuary. I thought of Adam somewhere far away, of my parents aging under a desert sky, of Grandma watching from wherever good souls go when they're done fighting. I smiled. "You were right, Grandma," I whispered. "Some seeds take longer to bloom, but they still do." And with that I knelt, pressed my hand into the soil, and felt it pulse beneath me, alive, forgiving, eternal.